Cloud. Hey, everybody. It's a little after 6 now, Eastern. Thanks for joining us tonight. I really appreciate everybody coming and joining. I'm Rob Kalman, and I'm pretty sure most of you, I see a lot of familiar faces on the Zoom call, but I'm on Metro Detroit, and I run an agile coaching and training company here, and we do a lot of IT work. And we've been, I think, gosh, a lot of you have taken classes from us and have engaged with us. What we've done for the last year and a half is we have talks, we have meetups I try to do once a month, sometimes a little in between, some interesting topics to help out people and just engage and have a free-flowing discussion. And we've had some really interesting topics. I'm pleased that Diana Larsen is joining us. Diana and I have worked together a couple of times this past year. We've run a couple of retrospective workshops, and she did a retrospective meetup for us. And we're going to continue next year. And she's agreed graciously to help us out tonight with a talk. We'll be here for the next hour. I think Dana was about a 40-minute talk, half-hour talk.
Something like that. Yeah. I'm going to try to go through the slides pretty fast, but because I want to give plenty of time for questions. But
yeah, I was going to say we'll have questions at the end. You can, feel free to jump in at the end and talk, or you can chat the question and I'll read it out for you. But thanks for joining, guys. And Diana, I'm going to hand it over to you.
All right. Thank you. It's good to see everybody this evening for you, for Ben and me. It's still kind of afternoon, but it's at least we still got some light, which is nice. So I've got on this first slide, I put a lot of the ways that you can get in touch with me. I'm connected to the agilefluency.org Agile Fluency Project group. I also have my own website, dianalarsen.com. You can find me or access me in a couple of ways on Twitter, and I have my LinkedIn profile link here if you'd like it. I will repeat that again at the end. You don't have to make a decision right now whether you want to connect with me or not. You can wait till the end and then take a screenshot of the slide if you want. Feel free to take screenshots of the slides as we go along. But I am also willing to send out this whole slide deck if somebody wants it. So I'll just, I'll make a PDF, and then if anybody wants to get a copy of it, I'll send that to you. So you can just get in touch with me and let me know. So I wanted to talk a little bit about how I got to Liftoff and about my background particularly in the Agile space. Although some of the things that interest me started interesting me even before I was in the Agile space. I mean, things like effective collaboration, that model, that team communication model that I show here, I actually created in the mid to late 90s when I was doing a lot of work process redesign and team development work then, before I met people from the Agile Manifesto crew and so on. And then once I got into the Agile space, I thought, I want to contribute the things that I've learned from previous team development. And one of the things that was really important to me was the idea that people are in charge of improving their own product quality, their own work process, their own interactions in their teams. And so the first thing that I wanted to contribute when I came into the Agile community was about organizational change, but also about how groups of people can improve. And so I wrote with Esther Derby, the Agile Retrospectives book. We are working right now on a second edition of that book, which should be out in the early part of next year. And then more recently, I've been thinking a lot about resilient learning teams. So it's team development, but teams of people that know how to learn and grow well together and can learn enough to make good decisions together and those kinds of things. And that's really led me to participate either as a co-author or as a contributor to a number of different things. The Liftoff book we're going to talk about tonight Also the Agile Fluency model that I created with James Shore, 5 Rules for Accelerated Learning, which I created with my son, Willem Larsen, and then The Art of Agile Development, the second edition of that book, which was Jim's major early contribution to the Agile community. He has now written a second edition that features the Agile Fluency model in it quite a bit. And I'm lucky in that you can't see it probably, but in these little words down here, I'm one of the contributing authors to that book. So I keep coming back to these things around collaboration and improvement and resilience in the face of change and learning. Those are the things that keep me interested. And certainly helping teams to lift off is another piece of that. So what we're going to talk about over the next few minutes is team success, how we plan a liftoff to help us reach team success, and then a major part of a liftoff, which is team chartering. And then at the end of it, we'll have questions. And so you can write your questions in the chat as we go along. You can write a question and not enter it in the chat in case you get a different question you'd rather have me answer, and then we can just all turn them all on, enter them all at once, and that could be fun. But we'll figure out a way to think about the questions and or comments. I'm also interested in your comments on these materials. So we're going to go through this pretty fast, and because I want there to be plenty of time for questions, and we can always come back to things. So again, this is really about how do we set things up to be successful? How do we start and sustain successful agile teams is the subtitle to the Liftoff book. Well, so what is team success? Well, in my mind, team success means high value delivery. And high value delivery also has a particular definition for me. It means that we've delivered what the customer wants, has said they wanted, that they accept it once we bring it to them, and we know they've found it valuable because they give us value back for it. They give value to the business, and that creates value for the business. It happens in a time frame that suits the customer's needs. It's easily maintainable and supportable after we deploy it, after we release it to them. And it has to happen in a way that leaves team members ready and eager to work on the next deliverable. And for me, it needs all of those 5 parts to be a really high value delivery. So how do we know if we're ready for a liftoff? A liftoff is a way of helping teams get started with everything they need to give them a more accelerated start, that they can get into performing well together as quickly as possible. And sometimes liftoffs happen after a team has been thrashing for a while, and we decide, oh, they need a little bit of a reset. And so that's another good time for a liftoff. But in general, we think about liftoffs being when a team first comes together. So we do liftoffs because they contribute to that team cohesion. They help to unite the strategy, tactics, and execution of the team, because we're talking about that right from the beginning. The groups form resilient learning teams so that they can operate independently of other teams as much as possible, and can get the things done that they need to get done. A liftoff helps to establish a context for the work that the team is going to do. Where in what universe is this work existing, and how does it connect to the other things that are there? We help to clarify working relationships and roles within the team. Very often we reset to recapture or build momentum if it's a new or a team that's been having problems. Or if it's a team that's gotten significant number of new members or really made a shift, you can help with that inclusion. So there's in all of those ways, liftoffs can help with move a team along. So the first thing we need to do is to gauge readiness. Is this organization ready to lift off this team, this newly formed team, or this team that's been having problems? So one of the first questions I always ask when I'm facilitating a liftoff is there a sponsor? Is there a product manager or business liaison that's going to be able to communicate with the team what are the next most valuable things for them to build? And so we start there. And if that's not present, we need to go take care of that before we think about lifting off the team. We also need to be able to articulate the business case. I said that the team needs to understand its context. If this team is expected to contribute to the achieving something in the business direction, they need to understand what that is. And so we need to be able to help the team understand what is the business case for the product that they're building. And then, is there funding? Is there a budget for this team to work well together? Whether the team is managing the budget or someone else is managing it, we need to have some idea of the resources that are available to the team, not the people, but the other kinds of resources, the information and equipment and all those other things. And then, is there a clear intention for what we want this team to accomplish? Are we going to just toss them together? I heard somebody, one of the Agile Manifesto signers actually, in the early days, say, oh, well, the way you create self-organizing teams is you just get a bunch of people and you put them in a room together and close the door and they'll self-organize. And I went up at the break and I said, well, yeah, they'll self-organize just to get themselves out of the room. I mean, they need to know why they're there, and they need some additional context in order for that kind of self-organizing to happen. But if you can answer all these questions in the affirmative, if you can say yes to all these things, then we're ready to get started thinking about it's time to do a liftoff. So when we're thinking about planning and designing a liftoff, we want to think about how many teams are we going to lift off all at the same time. I've done as many as a dozen teams all in the same room at the same time lifting off. I've not tried that remotely. In the remote setting, I tend to do one at a time. I worked with a client recently where I trained a whole bunch of internal coaches. There were 30 some internal coaches that interacted with 240 different teams. And we were setting up a program for them to lift off all those teams. It took them from April through just last month to get that whole process completed. But they had plans and they had designs for doing it, and that helped them move through it more quickly. So this is really important. And you want to plan and design even if you're just working with one team. You want to make sure that that team has the very best possible start. So we're working here to create and promote more team cohesion. So we want this team to come together to feel like a team as quickly as possible and to have all the understandings that they need to have in order to function, to collaborate effectively together. So we acknowledge that this may be either a new experience for them or confusing if they've, one of those teams that's doing a restart, they may not know exactly where they are. We want to make sure that we provide some structure for them. We give them some good information and we show them how they will be supported as they move through this. And we manage participation so everyone has a voice. This has to be a co-created experience for everyone on the team. We want to set a certain tone. We want to set a tone of openness and trust, because how we begin with a team is what's going to carry them through as they continue to go through. And then we want to focus on what's doable. And so some ways of doing that are to create an initial team charter. to spend some time clarifying the working relationships within the team. Are there going to be specific roles and responsibilities, or are we all responsible for everything? Doesn't really matter what the nature of those working relationships are. We just need to make sure that they're clear to everyone. And we want to clarify our external working relationships outside the team, right, with the team, and so that they understand who are their most important stakeholders, who do they need to go to for certain kinds of resources that they might need, those kinds of things. We want to get them started on regular retrospectives right from the beginning. If they want to let go of some of them later on, that's fine, but we start as we want to continue. We start with a focus on improvement. So we want retrospectives to begin right in the beginning, and we often will spend some time defining whatever definitions of done are most relevant to this particular team. That varies from place to place, but it's useful to kind of know, how do we know when pieces of work are complete? And so we spend some time on that. So the activities that we do can take a huge number of forms. So this is a plan for that group of 12 teams that I was talking about, where we did a liftoff with. No, this wasn't that one. This was like, there were like 15 teams that all needed to get lifted off in a pretty close proximity in time. And so we decided that we would do some liftoff activities together and some liftoff activities separately. So, and not everybody had to attend every single thing. There was some selection here. So this was a really big liftoff where we had a panel. We had this. I love this one. That in the midday on Tuesday, we had a lunch that we called the Skeptics Roundtable and we had a panel of folks who had thought that Agile couldn't really possibly work, but then had become fans later. And so they talked about that journey to help bring some people who were still feeling a little skeptical, to bring them along. We made some special attention to product owners, business analysts, and Scrum Masters, and how their jobs overlapped and how they were separate. We had some time with the leaders and so on. And then in this instance, we broke up the chartering into 3 separate chunks. And so all the teams would go to different places. They each had a facilitator, and someone was leading them through the purpose, alignment, and context, which we'll talk about later. And so this was the key for that. Not every liftoff is this complicated. There are a lot of liftoffs that are just, meeting with the product owner and the sponsor, and then a day with the team, and then we're ready to go. But some of them need more. So the kinds of things that you might include, you're definitely going to want to include team chartering. That's kind of the must-have. But beyond that, you might have an executive or sponsor come and communicate to the team just how they do fit into that business case and why their work is going to be important to the company. We might do something like begin to set up our iterations or sprint cadence, and have a sprint 0 that helps people get everything together before they actually get started in the first sprint. There might be training boot camps if there are new tools that people need to learn how to use, or languages or equipment. We might do some boot camp training, collaborative learning, like that. Retrospectives and futurespectives might be included. Impact mapping or story mapping might be appropriate depending on the team. We might do some work preparing that initial backlog. We might have some kind of open space meeting where people get a chance to bring up their issues and talk about the things that they want to talk about. So there are a lot of different kinds of activities that we might include in a liftoff. And it all depends on the needs of the business and the needs of the teams involved. But you can see it's a wide range that we might do. But in every one, we're going to include an Agile team chartering. And the model works itself out over 2 sessions. The first is a pre-work session that we have with product management, sponsor, facilitator, whatever the business liaison is called in your organization, whether it's product owner or product management. Whoever those folks are, they come together, that small group, including the person who's going to facilitate the liftoff, come together. And what they do is they figure out a draft, a very rough draft of the parts of the purpose that for this team. And they have some conversations so that they are clear on what all those elements of purpose are. And then once we have that, then we're ready to get started with the team. So then the second session is the Agile team chartering session. And there, the product owner is a part of that, the development team itself, the facilitator, and you may even include some key stakeholders. And what we're going to work on there is purpose again, but then also alignment and context. So the model is these 3 elements: purpose, alignment, and context. Lots of teams will do alignment. A lot of teams will do team building kind of things, but they don't do purpose and they don't do context. Or some places will do purpose, but they don't do the alignment things and the context things. What Ainsley and I discovered was that you really need all 3 pieces. People need to understand where they fit in the organization and what their work fit, how their work fits in the organization, how they're going to work together, and what it is they are brought together to do. So we need that because the purpose is what inspires us. I mean, if you read Dan Pink or any of the other literature out there about purpose, Simon Sinek, Start with Why, right? All those things, that's where our inspiration comes from. And inspiration adds some things to the team that are very important. Then alignment is what builds that collaborative tone that tells us how we're going to work together and gives us some initial conversations about how this particular group of people want to make sure that that happens. And then finally, context is important because context is dynamic. In today's world, things are changing all the time. So we need a sense of the kind of grounding of where we started from, what was our initial context. And then as it changes, we can keep track of that and we can always sort of know where we're going. So let's just look at purpose for a minute. I said purpose provides some things, and these are the kinds of things that it provides. It brings an inspiration to the team about why it's important that they do this work. That gives significance. I don't know if you are familiar with the Project Aristotle stuff that talks about psychological safety, dependability, something else, and then impact and meaning, right? Impact and meaning are so important for teams. And so we want to make sure that they understand what the impact is we hope they will have and how they can find meaning in this work. And so that's the significance and the motivation. And then that helps them understand they can tell when they're successful if they've had a chance to do those things. The way we do that in team chartering is we talk about the product vision. And if your product is a service, then we talk about the service vision. But the idea is, how is the world going to change as a result of the product that we're creating? What's going to be that impact? How do we envision that impact that it's going to have on our customers, our users, whomever that is? And then given that, what is the mission of this team? Because on occasion, you will have several teams working toward the same product vision, but each team needs as much and as far as possible its own discrete mission, its own discrete part of that work. And so we want to be clear with this team. And so the product vision is the first draft of that in that first session that the sponsor and the product management folks put together, that's usually well known, and they kind of know what that needs to be. And so that's the draft that they bring to the team. And then the team, by asking questions and giving some input about what really feels significant to them, what really is motivating to them, the product folks may adjust that vision as a result of the team's input. That group will also take a try at identifying the team mission, but the team will have a lot more input on what the actual work is to accomplish that vision. And so that's what the mission describes. What is this exact work that we're going to do together? And then mission tests are the sort of success indicators along the way. And, we chose mission tests just because in Agile, so many things are test driven. So we said, well, we've got a mission, so let's call them mission tests. but if you can call them indicators, you can call them, key results, you can call them whatever you want. But the idea is it's shorter term things than the whole vision that will help us know if we're on the path to success. Have we hit this milestone? Have we hit this shorter term goal that we're looking for, that will show us that we're still on the right path? So those three things together are the purpose. And when a team has a draft of that, they are ready to get to work. They really get charged up, and they're ready to start working together. Oops. And then the second part is the alignment. And so alignment is really about creating a unified team, starting the trust building that is so important when people come together to work as part of a team, and set that tone of collaboration and that commitment, that group commitment. And we think about that commitment in three ways. They're committed to the deliverable. They're committed to team success, and they're committed to taking care of each other on the team, to their teammates' success. And so we look at all three of those things and we put that together. And the way we do that is we look at a team is a complex system. So we look at what kind of simple rules that do we want to identify for this team that will make this team feel like they're in alignment. The different team members can make decisions even if they're separate from the team, and know that is something the rest of the team will support. And then we talk about who is on this team. What are the skills and abilities that different people have? What do the various team members want to learn? What besides a paycheck would they like to get out of this experience of working together? And then finally, we create some working agreements. And these are for when the team is together, what are the guidelines for how they're going to behave and how they're going to do their work. And so those are really important. And a lot of teams will do working agreements, but they do it out. They don't have all those other things there. And so there's not as much, maybe it's not as much buy-in, or maybe not as much real groundedness in them. And then the last part of the chartering is the context. And the context is here because we want to help our teams see the system that they're in. They are a system as a team, but they exist in a larger system. And we want them to be able to see that and then understand where they fit and the work that they're doing, where does that fit into that larger system of achievement that this company is trying to pull together. And then also have a chance to begin to think about risks, so that if we understand what our threats and opportunities might be for coming toward us, and this is always in the hands of project managers before, but we believe that the team needs to understand about how to anticipate those risks and mitigate the threats and encourage the opportunities. And the team can understand more about that. And so with that, we do an exercise around boundaries and interactions that helps us to visualize the system. We talk about the resources, again, not people, but all the other things, permission to make decisions, information sources, all those kinds of things that the team is going to need to do the work. They've identified now what they believe is going to be their mission. So now they have an idea about what are the resources that they already have, what ones don't they have, and how are they going to get the things that are missing. And then finally, we do a prospective analysis. You might do impact mapping here. You might do story mapping. There might be some other things you would do here. But we want that ability to start looking out ahead at what is the work we're going to do, what are the constraints or mitigations out there that we want to pay attention to. And then at the end of that session, we have a draft. We're never trying to create the perfect team charter, because the way the charter becomes useful is if the team is engaged with improving it all the time. So as we learn that, one working agreement isn't as important as another working agreement, we can swap that out, put a new one in, so that the charter is always a living document. We don't actually know what the ultimate charter is until the day we stop working on the product, right? That at that point in time, then we understand what the whole charter was. But until then, it's evolving along with the evolving needs of the team and so on. And so in the book, we talk about some of the ways in which to make that happen. Retrospectives and planning sessions, and there's lots of opportunities to continue to evolve that charter so that it's useful to the group. Whew, that was a fast trip. Lots more on all of those topics in the Liftoff book. So if it's interesting to you, I encourage you to go get the book. But for now, let's just look at the questions and comments that you have right now.
This is where you can either, if you want, you can sort of let me know if you want to ask a question, or you can put something in chat. And I know that this is not a bashful group, so there's going to be one or two.
And also, rather than using the reactions thing, because I never can see those little hands and things, if you have a question and you just want to ask it out loud, do this. This I can see. Those little yellow hands are really hard for me to see. But if you've got a question, just raise your hand and say, I'd like to talk, or a comment, either one. Ben.
I have a comment about the freedom that last slide gave everybody, not the one about questions.
Yeah.
The one before that said it's a living document, and that that you don't have to get it perfect. And I go back to what probably the one sentence that got me caught on Agile a long time ago, which was that you never know less about a project than at the beginning. Right. And that kind of caught me about the adaptiveness of agility. Yeah. And I really appreciate that there's a lot of work that goes into the Liftoff, but that it never ends.
Right.
Thank you for that.
Sure thing. Yeah. Yeah, Donna. Thank you. See how well that works? It's so much easier to see.
No, I had to get used to that. So my question is, and it's earlier in your slide about product owners, like identifying the product owner, what is it? I think the product manager, the sponsor.
Yeah.
Well, knowing what the product sponsor is, of course, but if I was just going to take product owner, if you don't have a product owner, like you just don't have one, right? How do you kind of go through the slides that you mentioned, the process without having that? And you typically will kind of give it to the person on the team that's creating some, like the outline of the work, and they're putting it together, right? Your backlog, your first backlog items, like that. So
Yeah.
how do you get around that?
Well, product owner is a term that is specific to many Scrum teams, though not all. And I've looked and looked for a more generic term for what you just described. That person who is in charge of communicating to the team what the product needs to do, as far as we know now, right? So in the beginning, there's someone, I've worked in organizations where that person had a job title of functional analyst. I've heard business analyst. I've heard, and in a lot of the materials that we use at the Agile Fluency Project, we just dodge the whole thing and we just call it the business liaison. But that person usually, in some places it's still called a project manager. That person usually is different from the executive sponsor or the product development director or whomever it is sponsoring that this product needs to be built and advocating for it in the rest of the organization. Those folks aren't generally the ones that are working directly with the teams to tell them, in our research, we believe customers are going to find this more valuable than that. Let's work on this first. Let's wait on that till later. We don't know enough to do that one yet to work on that later, but we think it's going to be included later on, but it's not top of the backlog yet. Whoever is having those kinds of conversations with the team needs to be a part of that initial session where we start really lining out, well, at least in the beginning, what do we think is the purpose for this team? Because that's going to be the person whose every communication kind of needs to be in alignment with that purpose, right? They need to be promoting that purpose in their communications with the team and their interactions with the team. So that's why we want them prepared ahead of time. And we want them to be part of a conversation so that they know that they're working with the team on something they feel they can support, that they can feel is important. So that's, yeah. So, job titles, I don't really care, whatever that person who does that work is called in your organization, that's who needs to be in that meeting, right?
Perfect.
Sure.
Yeah, Diana, I had a question that was sent directly to me.
Okay.
I'm going to read it. The person would love to hear about having managers coming to the team with a drafted mission statement and how to deal with teams respond to that with, what they said is fine with us.
Yeah. Well, yeah. There are a lot of ways. I mean, the culture of the organization is really important here. And if the team feels safe, in general, they will have some good feedback on that draft mission that's brought. And what we say is you've got to do that mission, the mission that you bring to the team, you are doing in the absence of the input of the people who are actually going to do the work. So they definitely are going to have something to say about it. And if they're not saying anything, then that's the job of the facilitator, to create that safe space in as far as you possibly can and encourage the team members to begin to speak up. And so I would start asking questions about the current, whatever that draft mission that the pre-work provides. I just start asking some questions. Oh, do you really, is this, do you think that working in pairs is going to be the way you want to do this work? Or is there some other way that it's better? Or do you really think this is a Rails project? Should we be using some other language? Whatever happens to be there. Just start asking, be curious, start asking those kind of provocative questions. And sooner or later, somebody will snap and speak up. It's maybe the most senior engineer or or somebody, if you can make them kind of dumb questions, sooner or later, somebody's going to say, oh, no, of course not. No, we're not going to do it that way. We can't do it that way. Well, we're going to need to think about this. It's like, oh, okay, well, now let's keep moving on that and really get clear about what is it we're going to need to do in order. And are we going to approach this as individual contributors, in which case we're probably not very agile, but that's okay. Are we going to pair on things? Are we going to swarm occasionally? Are we going to mob all the time? Some of those, how we're going to work, some of the abilities need to be in that mission statement. What are the security requirements for this particular product? Maybe there are none, but often there are. What other kind of quality issues? Does it have to have a very high level of user interaction, or can it be pretty static? Or, those kinds of things. We start looking at all those non-functional requirements as well as the functional requirements of the deliverable that we know up front or that we suspect. And then we will, like Ben said, we'll clarify those over time as we begin to learn more, but we've got to have a place to start. It's just so impossible to start from a blank page. So we just give people something to begin to talk through, and then the job of the facilitator there is to really make sure those conversations happen in a good way.
That's good. Thank you. And anybody have, I think I saw somebody, Alvin?
Alvin, yeah.
Hi, greetings, everyone. So I have a question in regards to the perspective analysis part of the presentation there. If you're already tried to redraft working agreements, let's say you're in your second round of that and the team is starting to come around, when would probably be the best time to introduce the impact analysis? How would it be where they feel like they have to go back to the drawing board? Like, so what would be the best way to introduce?
When I'm working with a brand team that's brand new to each other, when I do a perspective analysis, there's a particular kind of graph that I do where I have people brainstorm things that might happen in the next 3 months. Somebody's going to get the flu, or, somebody's going to have a baby and the baby's probably going to be born in this next quarter, or whatever it might be, things that will affect the team and their ability to get work done. Right. And that might be good things, and it might be not great things. Right. And so I have people brainstorm those, and then in small groups, they work on those items to say, is this going to have a positive impact on the team, or is it going to have a negative impact on the team? And what is the likelihood that this will happen? Is it definitely going to happen? I mean, somebody's going to get sick this winter. We just don't know who, and we don't know what they're going to get sick with or how long they'll be out, but we know somebody's going to get sick, right? There are certain things that, even though we can't know the detail, we do know, right, that they're definitely going to happen. But then that goes on a scale to, it could happen, but probably not. I mean, here in Portland, Oregon, Mount St. Helens or Mount Hood might erupt again, right? And if it did, it would completely destroy our project, but it's not very likely. So we can put that way down on the likelihood scale. But we try to have fun with it, just brainstorming all the possible things that could happen in the next 3 months. And then after we figure out the impact, positive or negative impact, and the likelihood, then we place those all on a grid. And then we begin to talk about, well, these things that could have a really positive impact, but they're only, maybe they'll happen, maybe they won't. Is there anything we can do to encourage those things? What about these things down here that we think are pretty likely to happen and would really cause us problems? Is there anything we can do to mitigate those things? So when a team is first coming together, I use that activity. But if a team is doing a restart and they've already been doing a lot of this work, that's when I tend to say, okay, let's go back to the drawing board. Let's do an impact mapping, or let's do a story mapping, or those kinds of things to start looking. We're still looking ahead, but we're doing it with some knowledge of where we've been together already. And some we now know more stuff than we knew right in the beginning. So we can now rely on some of those things. So, it's up to the facilitator to pick kind of the right activity for the right time. In general, we are just recommending that there's some activity that helps the team understand how it fits into the larger organization, maybe what its working relationships are outside the team. There's some activity that helps it assess whether it has the right things that they're going to need to do the work. And then something that helps them look out ahead and not just be heads down in the moment with no sort of context in time about what might be happening to them. So that's what we look at. And we just make sure we have an activity that will serve in each of those ways. And then the team has a fuller picture of their overall context. Yeah.
Cool. Looks like Megan had a question
Yeah.
too here. What can be done to help a team start holding each other accountable to their working agreement and simple rules?
Well, in the first place, we make sure that it's the team that has created those things, that those weren't imposed by somebody else. People tend to take more. I don't really like the term accountable so much. It has the overtone of the potential for blaming each other, and that's always destructive in a team. So what I want is what can be done to help a team, all the team members, step up to feeling responsible for making sure that the simple rules and working agreements are being adhered to. And, sometimes I've noticed that when team isn't adhering to certain working agreements, it's because they don't need that one anymore, or it's become redundant. So sometimes that's a sign that there needs to be a change, not that I want to force somebody to keep adhering to that one. Maybe it's not relevant anymore. So, but that tells me it's time to bring it up as a conversation, right? These were the working agreements. These were the simple rules that we created when we worked on our charter most recently. Let's look at them. It seems like we're not following them as much as we used to. Why is that? Are we not following them because they're not relevant? Or are we not following them because they're getting in the way of us doing work? Or is it just, do we need to support each other in a different way to make it easier for us to follow those rules? So I'd start looking at those kinds of things before I started saying, I want to hold you accountable. Because anytime I hear the word hold accountable, I see this gesture in my mental image, right? And anytime that's happening in a team, it's destructive. So actually, there's we were talking earlier, I don't know if it was just you and me, Rob, or if we were talking when more people were here, about a book that I'm working on right now with Tricia Broderick. And we are looking at how can we create organizations that are as blame-free as they can possibly be. Because all we see in that kind of blaming behavior is stuff that keeps things from happening. It gets in our way. It doesn't help us produce or perform. So, yeah.
Yeah, we got to thank you for Megan too.
Yeah, I see that. Thank you. You're welcome, Meg.
That's good. Any other thoughts from any of you guys? We got a few more minutes with Diana. This doesn't happen very often where you get a free 10 minutes with her. Donald's back.
Yeah.
I'll ask one more question. When you mentioned that you can reset your teams, and I don't know, maybe you answered it already. How would you go about that if you already have a team established?
Mhm.
You're doing your retros, you're doing like all the ceremonies. But you feel like you need to reset, you need to maybe energize or start to try to get yourself back on track, or make sure
Right.
everyone's on the same, or have a shared vision? Like, how would you go about that?
Yeah, well, there are just a lot of teams that don't have the opportunity to have a liftoff in the beginning, to have that accelerator for themselves. And a lot of different things can happen that can cause a team to start sort of thrashing and churning. Maybe they're having a lot of turnover in the team. Maybe, you know, any number of things can happen. And so when the team kind of gets itself wrapped around its own axle, they probably stopped doing retrospectives, in my experience. That's one of the things that gets thrown, or they're doing them in a way where they're not getting any good out of them. Somebody on Twitter the other day said, "Oh, I figured out how to be so much more efficient. We just do product demo, retrospective, and planning all in one big meeting, 6 hours online." And I just, oh my God, how awful that would be. And how are you going to get any good out of any 3 of those meetings by holding them in that way and just keeping, anyway. So lots of things can happen, right? And that gets a team being to a place where it's not feeling good. The team members aren't feeling good about being part of the team. Who's their business liaison isn't feeling good about the output, and so on. And I think that's just a good time for somebody, usually somebody that has some influence. So maybe a product owner, maybe the Scrum Master, maybe the team lead, the technical lead, somebody like that, to say, hey, I think what we need to do is hit the reset button. Let's go and create a new charter. And we'll go through all those pieces and parts and just make sure we're all clear about how we want to work together. And, everybody understands that sometimes you have to hit a reset button on whatever is going on, right? That's just not functioning the way it's supposed to. And so you stop it, you turn it off, and then you turn it back on again, right? And so a liftoff can provide that.
Cool.
Mm-hmm.
So we've got a couple minutes left. I just want to do a quick wrap up, and then I want to, be aware of the time box we gave everybody, and then I'll shut the recording off. And if you want to stick around for maybe 5 minutes, we could talk after that. But I always want to say thank you to Diana for joining us for the hour. It's great. She and I have done, like I said, we've done a couple retrospective workshops, and they've been a lot of fun, and I think helpful for some of the organizations, public and private ones. If you have questions, I'm going to get the recording out to people who want to see it. And you'll have my email address. We can get Diana, that's the deck, the slides, we can share it with you.
Mm-hmm.
You have any questions, you've got my email, you've got my mobile numbers, michiganagiletraining.com. And I'm going to shut the recording off. Diana, do you want to say anything?
Well, I was just going to say, I mentioned earlier that I work with an organization that had the 32 coaches, the 240 teams that have been working through, and we did a whole training on liftoffs at the beginning of that. And if that's something that you think would be interesting to your organization, be sure to get in touch with Rob about that, and we'll work out how that could happen.
Yeah, we've done private retrospectives, and we're definitely going to do some liftoff. I think what we might do is do another retrospective workshop, probably around the time your second edition of the book comes out in March or April, and then do a public liftoff. But thanks for joining, guys. I'm shutting the recording off, but stick around and we'll talk a little more.